I'm M. Sutter, better known as Pints and Panels.
And I am Don Tess, better known as the Don of Beer.
Welcome to the 24th episode of the All About Beer podcast. Every 2 weeks, we talk with leading experts and take a deep dive into one topic in beer. Visit allaboutbeer.com and follow us on social media at allaboutbeer. And if you're feeling generous, why don't you throw us a few bucks at our Patreon site, patreon.com/allaboutbeer to support this show and others. This week's episode, we're going to be talking with two giants of spontaneous fermentation and how old world thinking versus new world ideas shape a unique subset in brewing. Don, are you a spontaneous gentleman?
I do not like spontaneity. I like things to spec and predictable.
That is not accurate at all. Well, I like spontaneity, and I especially love when it's used in beer. Especially with these two guests we have lined up today. This is exciting.
Yeah. Yes. As you know, I'm super nerdy, and I'm really looking forward to
nerdy.
hearing all about like Wickerhammer myces and Brettanomyces and Pediococcus and all that.
It's going to be awesome. I'm looking forward to it. So we'll introduce our guests and get into a conversation. But first, here is a word from our sponsor. And if you would like to help support the All About Beer podcast, reach out to podcast@allaboutbeer.com.
Estrella Galicia is an independent family-owned brewery in northwest Spain, founded in 1906. Estrella Galicia Cerveza Especial is a world-class lager brewed using the finest Spanish malts, locally cultivated Galician hops, and the best brewing practices made out of the state-of-the-art facility in A Coruña. Recognized around the world for quality and exceptional character, Estrella Galicia is a beer like no other. To learn more about Estrella Galicia, follow them at Estrella Galicia USA on Instagram.
Looking for an easy hop sourcing experience? Yakima Valley Hops offers the finest quality hops from right here in our valley and premium growing regions around the world. Get the hops you need when you need them with ultra-fast shipping and awesome customer service. With a full line of liquid hop products and all your favorite varieties, no contracts are needed to brew with the best. Shop now at yakimavalleyhops.com. That's YAKIMA valleyhops.com.
Werner von Obberghen is one of the owners of brewery Fonteinen. In 2013, Armand Debelder and Michaël Blancquaert called upon Werner to help shape the future of Fonteinen. With his experience in strategy and with masters in finance and business economics, he is now responsible with Michaël for managing Fonteinen and its team of 20. Michaël takes care of the creative and operational side, while Werner manages the business side. Michaël and Werner continue the lifelong craftsmanship of Armand, and inspired by his values and wishes, took Fonteinen a step further, with longer barrel aging, a local cereal and hop collective with farmers, a network of families with sour cherries, and a direct relation with some of the most progressive biodynamic winemakers are just a few examples. Welcome to the show, Werner.
Thank you very much for having me.
First of all, I want to ask, how do I've been pronouncing Fonteinen, or however, wrong for my entire life. Please pronounce it for us so I don't ever do that again.
Well, actually, you were very close. It's Fonteinen. So Fonteinen. So it's a bit more the Fonteinen, a bit more pronounced in a kind of a Flemish or really Dutch way. So that's fine.
Okay, good. Well, I'm going to still pronounce it wrong probably in the future, but I will correct people who
even though you say it wrong.
Even though I'm going to say, I'm going to so we're very happy that you're here because we're excited to talk about lambic and gueuze and fruit lambic production with you. What's the brewing process like at the brewery on, like, let's say a weekday? What's your day-to-day? How are things? Or is it different every day? Or since you're not brewing until the winter what's the day-to-day process like over there?
So yes, it's like you say, we only brew winter months. Generally speaking, from the beginning of November to more or less mid-April, and everything depends on the night temperatures. Also this year, for example, our last season shifted a bit. We only started mid-November and we ended somewhere beginning of May. So we're actually driven by night temperatures, and Whereas the brewing itself is a very technical process. It's like with every brewing installation. In terms of brewing lambic, there's quite some particular differences with other styles of beer. Among others, the difference between the cereals that are used. So we use a lot of raw wheat, for example. We also use aged hops where the alpha acids have been dropping over the years of aging, or we use fresh hops, but very local ones, very old varieties, like for example the Gueuze, who by nature already have a very low alpha acid. We also boil for a very long time. We boil up to 5 hours.
Cool.
And then, the biggest difference is that we actually pour the boiling wort onto cool ships. So we don't cool down the wort, but we leave it to cool down overnight. And that is where the biggest difference in a let's say modern brewing process is with traditional lambic. But then, still every day is also different. So you have different wind directions, you have different night temperatures, you have different air pressures. So, and those elements all have an influence on the end result, being, for example, the sugar density of the worts, the number of liters that are left. And on top of that, and that is particular to Drie Fonteinen, we use a wide variety of different types of wheat and different types of barley. Because we work with a lot of local farmers. So that's, again, a very different impact on our brewing process. For example, only by changing from one type of raw wheat to another, the whole filtering dynamics is impacted. Sometimes the filtering time is doubled because we just switch to another type of raw wheat.
Oh, wow.
Huh. So Don. All right, Don, go.
Yeah, there's a million questions. I know that you're using low alpha hops when they're fresh or aged hops, and because you don't want the bitterness and the isomerized alpha acids. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Why raw wheat versus malted wheat or flaked wheat or torrefied wheat?
That's part of the tradition, because so with raw wheat you have this particular dynamic in not only the brewing process but also the fermentation of lambic and the aging of lambic, where you have a much slower consumption of certain material that comes with the raw wheat, and that's where also the Brettanomyces kick in, which is a very strong yeast, not in terms of short-term yield in terms of alcohol, but very much so in the very long-term fermentation and consumption of of components of coming from the brew itself.
It's diastatic.
Mm.
Yeah. My last question before, because I know I interrupted M's flow here, but you mentioned that the nighttime temperature, air pressure, winds will affect the resulting lambic. When you put that barrel, that brew into barrels, do you actually label each barrel saying, this was cooled on this night and this was the night temperature and the wind was from the southwest, et cetera, et cetera?
Well, that at a certain point in time, that was part of the ambition to keep track of all the variables. We even had a smart weather station, but then it ran on batteries. Sometimes the batteries were empty. Sometimes we didn't exchange them, and then so the focus was really on the brewing. So we do keep track of all the brews, the number of liters that came off the cool ship, the sugar density. We keep track of what wort went to what barrel, because we have a very low or we have a very small cool ship. We only have 3,000 liters, more or less, of net yield on average per brew day and night. And we have barrels that go up to 7,000 liters. So sometimes we need to have multiple brews on one barrel, or we also have small barrels because we don't standardize in any part of the process. We also have small barrels from 400 liters, 500, 6,000 to thousands. So then we need to split a certain brew over different barrels, but we do keep track of the brew days, what brews went on what barrels, then also later on in a blend of gueuze or for fruit lambic, what types of or what worts and what lambic that we have been using. So we keep track of that, but we don't link it to specific weather variables.
Okay.
But what we do know is that, for example, and that's something that we do keep track of. If you go from boiling worts to net coolship number of liters in the morning, it can be a difference in between 17 and 27% of loss, and that 10% range that will be let's say linked to the weather conditions at night.
Right. Awesome. Love it.
So actually, speaking of barrels, like where are the barrels coming from, and why are they important? Are you're reusing them a lot? Are you getting fresh ones? Are the fresh ones different varieties? How does that barrel aging process work?
So for the let's say the common barrels that are used for fermenting and aging lambic, those are what we call neutral barrels. So most of the times those barrels have already been used in wineries. In our case, it's most of those barrels come from the Barolo region, and they have been going around for, let's say, between 5 to 10 years with Barolo wine houses. The reason why we use used wine barrels is for the simple reason that the fresh oak tannins have been extracted by the wines. Also, just to be clear, all of those barrels have been neutralized. That means that we are not looking for the impact of the wine, but we are looking for the contact with the wood. So that also means that every barrel is opened again, and all of the winestone crystals that have been formed during the fermentation and the aging of the wines are removed. And if it must, even a part of the staves is shaved in case that the wine has entered too much into the wood. So that's your typical barrel that is used for lambic fermentation and aging. Next to that, we also have some more, let's say, specific barrels, among others, sherry barrels, where we're going to look for the characteristics of the sherry that have been or that has been lying on those barrels. In that case, we have those barrels emptied, we transport them over to our barrel house, and we immediately fill them with 1, 2, and even 3-year-old lambic to age further on those barrels to finish actually the lambic in the sherry cask. That's a second type of barrel. So, and of those, we meanwhile we have port barrels, we have Armagnac barrels, cognac barrels, whiskey barrels, but those are very small quantities.
Are those for specific, whiskey barrel aged lambics, or are those part of the blending process?
Those are for very specific blends that we make to really in order to look for the balance between the whiskey and the lambic.
I've never had a whiskey barrel
No,
aged.
neither have I. And I love whiskey. So
yes, you do, Don. Oh, when is the whiskey barrel aged lambic being released?
Well, for the moment, it's being aged, or it's aging on the whiskey barrels. So, and those have been, I think they have been filled with lambic about a year ago. So normally, let's say in the second half of 2023, we will taste and look what we're going to do with it. Maybe we will blend it a bit more with lambic to make it a gueuze, or we will bottle it as such. That really depends on what is coming off the barrel, and what we actually like, or what we think that would even support the lambic even more.
Lambic production is very much a blending art, isn't it?
Well, that's what Armand always explained. It's the brewing is very technical. That is something that you can learn, but the blending, it's something that you have that really is passed on generation to generation, because it's not something that you can learn from a book. Of course, there's a very let's say technical part to it, meaning that you have to have residual sugars from the young lambic to have a continued fermentation in the bottle. But how to balance the acidity with the softness of certain lambics, with the age of old lambics, to come to something that is really your signature as a brewery, as a blender, that is something you have to learn from, let's say your master. And that has always been, especially with Armand, he has been teaching it to Michaël. Michaël is now teaching it to 3 other people in the team, and yeah, it's a taste that you pass on actually, and that's it's like you say, Don. That's the real art.
Yeah, this is what I love. This is why I love lambic too. It's the art of it.
It's a little art and like a little magic because of the spontaneous fermentation. I think, like there's something about it that, like, we can in America recreate. We can try to create what you all do in the Senne River Valley, but it's incredibly unique, magical process that you possess. That's fascinating to me.
I share your sentiment in that sense that when I started drinking beer, I really fell in love, or I immediately fell in love with lambic. I never got to taste any other type of beer before I started drinking gueuze. And it was also Armand explaining to me how it was made, what the actual values were, and still are. And sometimes we are also surprised. I still remember about, it was 5 years ago, beginning of the summer, and all of our gueuze blends, after having bottle conditioned for 6 to 8 months, they were still flat. And Armand told us, don't panic, while I was panicking, because I'm responsible for paying all of our team members so that they have their salary neatly transferred to their bank account at the end of the month, and to pay all the suppliers. So I was a bit panicking, and Armand was like, just give those bottles their summer, and you will see the corks will be flying off. And effectively, let's say mid-August, we opened them again, and all of the bottles were popping. So in that sense, it's still magical for us as well, especially because we don't intervene in the fermentation. The only thing we measure while blending is the number or the degrees Plato, so the residual sugar that is left. All the rest we don't measure. The yeast activity, that's something we don't do. We really start with what are the different characteristics of the different lambics, how are we going to balance them, and for every blend of gueuze we start over again. We cannot make a blend of gueuze twice. So yeah, it's a big part still magical. On the other side, and that's also true throughout the course of the years that I already worked with Fonteinen, the idea of real spontaneous fermentation has been growing with a lot of brewers, and we often get bottles offered by those brewers to taste and just as a gift as well. And I do think that generally speaking, the quality of spontaneously fermented beers is really increasing. And I'm talking outside of the lambic world. And I've been drinking some very nice spontaneously fermented American beers as well.
Oh, well, that's good to hear that the quality of American outside spontaneous beers around the world are increasing in quality. That's very pleasing to me as an American.
I wanted to ask, do you think there is such a thing as terroir in beer? If there is, I would argue that it's most evidenced in lambic. And what is the limit of that? Like a lambic made within the city limits of Brussels, for example, versus where the Fonteinen is that how much of that is the way you make the lambic versus terroir of the cereals surrounding the brewery and the nighttime air and wind direction and all of that?
Mhm. Well, first of all, let's say that even 200 years ago, what is today Pajottenland and the Valley of the Sun, it actually was a cereal, the fruit, and the vegetable barn of Brussels. Lambic, like winemaking today, first of all, a winemaker is a farmer. Um, when we look at 150 years ago, there were more than 90 breweries and almost 300 gueuze blenders in this region. And a lot of the times they were linked to local farmers, or even more so. And I think Lindemans is a great example. You still see the old farm. A couple of 100 years ago, the brewery was actually in the farm. And during winter, they actually brewed what was coming off in the summer from the fields. And mostly also the malting happened on the attic with the heat of the brewery. So it was a very close cycle. And that is something that has been lost over the years. And then I'm really referring to the farming part. The farming, the malting, the brewing have become like global, let's say, different silos, almost literally. And the whole system has become very anonymous. The one is not talking to the next one anymore, or the other way around. So in terms of real terroir, I think, yeah, that's the issue that we have, is that when brewers are talking about their terroir, they even don't know where their cereals are coming from. When we started with our own cereal network in 2017, the very first question that we asked to our maltster was, where do the grains come from? And they said, like, from everywhere and nowhere. It can come from Germany, it can come from Ukraine, it can come even from the US. There's a lot of import in Belgium from the US of raw grains that are malted here. So we have lost the link with the farmers and with our own soil, in fact. And in beer, I think, like with wine, I think that's the biggest impact that you could make, is to give a certain character, a certain flavor to your beer. Of course, like you say, like with lambic, there's also the whole climate that is impacting. And there we do know that that for example, the difference between our brew house, which is 100 meters above sea level, it's actually the highest lambic brewery in the region, compared to the barrel house that is at 20 meters above sea level. We already have, like in winter times, a 2 degrees centigrade difference of temperature. So we know that if we would move the brewery, there would be a whole different dynamic. So that's also a element of terroir. And then it comes to the use of hops, of course. And I know there's some discussions about, you boil everything out, so there's no difference. But then I can say, you can still play with intensities. 2 weeks ago, we were at the Carnaval des Brettanomyces in Amsterdam, where we held a lecture about our cereal network, and we poured 2 lambics, 100% made with local cereals. So there's this I know there's this whole discussion about, everything gets boiled down. But 2 weeks ago, we were at Carnaval des Brettanomyces, where Lucas, he's managing the whole cereal network and the different farmers. He poured 2 different lambics, 100% made with local cereals, but different barley and different wheat. And the color was different, the characteristic was different. So, and that actually means that throughout the whole process, there is quite some difference when you start with different ingredients. And I do think that even I don't think it's a discussion about, is beer terroir related or not. I think it's a choice of the brewer to what extent he wants to go and have terroir expressed in his beer.
What about the fruit additions?
I just got goosebumps. Sorry.
Oh,
sorry.
Don gets really, this is Don's bread and butter. I'm trying to ask about fruit here, Don.
Go ahead.
you guys have a cherry orchard, correct? Or how
Yes.
how does some of the fruit, where is that cherry orchard in relation to the brewery?
So the brewery is at 5 minutes from the barrel house, and the cherry orchard is next to the barrel house.
Oh, wow. So
Okay.
so the cherries come from there, and then where does, because I will say, one of the best lambics I've ever had was at Fonteinen. I had a strawberry and raspberry blend. And it was the best strawberry like expression I've ever like experienced in lambic. And I was wondering, like, where do the fruits important part of the terroir and the brewing process as well, and where do those come from?
Okay, so yeah, and so the orchard are Schaerbeekse sour cherries. So and that orchard is quite young. We still have to wait for another 5 years before we will have a, let's say, a full yield. But we do work with more than 100 families from the region that have Schaerbeekse sour cherry trees in their garden, and so they bring them in, and we actually pay them. But that's a whole network that we're also managing, and that is still growing. So we're also giving away root shoots, ungrafted root shoots for them to plant in their garden. And we have their references, so we can communicate every beginning of the summer. So like now, for example, the harvest will start. So at the end of the day, there will be a lot of people coming in just with their sour cherries. For the other fruits, like for example, the strawberries that you mentioned with the raspberries, we work as local as possible, all organic. So with those typical fruits, I think we're at about around 30 miles around the barrel house. For other fruit types, because we do use grapes as well, we actually link with let's say natural winemakers and bio organic winemakers throughout the different regions within Europe where typical grape varieties are leading. For example, Beaujolais for Gamay grapes, in Alsace for Gewürztraminer grapes, Pinot Noir in certain regions of Germany. But all of those farmers, all of those winemakers have become friends meanwhile, and that makes it a very interesting how to say balance, because we do share the same values. We like a lot what they're doing, because most of the times it starts by just tasting what they're doing, whether it's strawberries or raspberries or the wines itself. But we try to link one-on-one directly with them. And that also depends on seasons. For example, last year was a very bad Schaerbeekse cherry season, so we got more plums instead, because it was a very good year for plums. And that is how you can start balancing the different fruits. So yeah, we how to say, we draw the line somewhere and we continue on that line. And yeah, the next part of the ambition is that we are, per blend that we make, we also expose all of the origins of the ingredients.
Oh, I look forward to that.
Yeah, me too.
When you add fruit, does it also add new microbes from the fruits that maybe spark an extra fermentation of any kind?
You will have a new fermentation, but the question is, are it the yeasts that see a new source of sugars from the fruit, or
Right.
is it new microbes that we don't know, and we have not had that researched either.
Okay.
It just happens.
It's magic.
Again, more magic.
At least part of it, yeah. Yeah, but yeah, the fruit comes in. And we put it on lambic. Yeah.
Awesome.
Don, what other questions do you have? I know you've got a lot. So
I wanted to give Werner an opportunity to describe. You've given this whole process, and I'm absolutely fascinated by it. You mentioned that Fonteinen has a signature flavor. I wanted to ask if you could describe that, and I think that you have one of the better reputations in lambic, and I know that there's a lot of magic involved in the way lambic is made. So how do you? I mean, you talked about the technical aspects of the brewing, but other than that, if there's so much magic, how do you make your lambic special, unique, and consistent? I know it varies, but there's still some sort of consistent thread throughout all your lambic. How do you do that? How do you control all that?
Yeah, first of all, and again, that's the part of the art. You have certain characteristics that are prone to the Fonteinen, which are if you have a fresh gueuze, so to say. I don't like the word fresh, because fresh in lambic it's already, let's say, a weighted average of more than 3 years, while a fresh IPA is like 2 days old. So when people refer to a fresh Drie Fonteinen, it will be more on, let's say, the higher side of acidity, citrus, but also a bit of grassy aroma. Whereas it ages after, and the sweet spot for us is like 5 years, where you get more to the stone fruit aromas. That is something that is proper to Drie Fonteinen. Secondly, in terms of consistency, and certainly consistency in aging, it's actually quite simple. You cannot trump nature. If you let the Brettanomyces do its job in terms of aging, then you get really, really far. And it's not difficult. You have the same with a well-made wine. You have the same with a well-made cider. If you don't start to intervene and add your own yeast and everything, you will get a beer that ages graceful. A second factor in that is that we only bottle our lambic beers. We don't use key kegs. It's currently a big challenge, because we see more and more lambic being, let's say, pushed into bars through key kegs. It's a big discussion between the lambic brewers as well. Historically, it's already a few years that there's quite some discussion about that, but we don't give up the bottle, because it's a way to have something or unique as a lambic to not only age gracefully, but also to have like it's a very rough word, a container that keeps, for example, pressure. If you want to start key kegging a lambic, you need to cut off the potential pressure buildup. And the way to do it, there's different ways to do it. Filtering is one of them, or mingling in other lower ABV or lower plateau beer as well. Which is not often lambic, but it can be called lambic, because there's also a huge gap in legislation in Belgium. So, but yeah, again, it's values that we want to continue, and there's already in the 1940s there was a big discussion on what the most noblest type of lambic was, and that was. The number one was all bottled gueuze, all bottled fruit lambic, and that's one of these values that Armand has held very highly, and that we only continue in honor of Armand, and also for the technical part of it. A bottle can sustain up to more than 9 bars of pressure, whereas, for example, a key keg, it's only 3 bars and a bit. So yeah. There's some technical sides to that discussion as well.
You mentioned Armand. I wanted to touch on him briefly, who was at the helm of Drie Fonteinen for years. I know he passed away a few years ago. You just mentioned him about doing bottles. How else does his legacy live on at the brewery?
First of all, so we first met about 10 years ago. So he was managing Brouwerij Drie Fonteinen himself, with, let's say, 2-3 people that helped from left and right. And yeah, so at that point, Fonteinen was already spread over 4 different locations. And the very first thing that he wanted to do is centralize everything. Back then, Michaël already worked at Fonteinen. And we sat around the table drafting a plan like, okay, how can we bring everything together while continuing brewing at the location that Armand brewed at, because it was a very, and it still is a very good brew house for lambic. So we started a plan, and as from the beginning, and that's something that Armand, also one of the values that Armand held high, and that he learned from Herman Terling, that he always referred to as his third grandfather. He always said, like, look, guys, I can give you my opinion, but it's up to you to do something with it or not. That's completely up to you to decide. But throughout the whole, let's say, continuation and evolution of Drie Fonteinen, we never had a discussion about the beer itself. And one of the clearest examples, that was the summer of 2017, where we actually sat together discussing about not only fruit, because with the fruit we already went to directly with farmers. We made a choice to go for only organic, while the beer at that point was not organically certified yet. And that Armand said, like, I would like to go back to our own back garden for everything that is cereals. And that's how it actually started. And that is where, he could fall back to a team of different people to make it happen. Because at that point, he was already, let's say, settling down a bit. He was doing the tours, he was receiving the people, but the day-to-day operations that he left to the rest of the team. But yeah, in that summer, we were reflecting on how can we get Drie Fonteinen even further than where we are today. That's what he said. We have to go back to our own back garden. And that's how the whole project started. And soon after, we met with Lucas, who's still working at Drie Fonteinen. He was a student back then. He was looking for a dissertation on what we call agroecology, which is really the link between, or linking different farmers in a strong network with customers, with fair price setting, with risk sharing, and so on and so forth. And we were actually the only brewery that was interested, and that's how we sat together and we started to discuss with farmers. And yeah, that was 5 years ago, and now we're actually fully already for 3 years. The complete mash bill consists of local cereals. And the next step is to find other parties to set up a micro maltery in the region, because the nearest maltery is in the middle of the Netherlands and in Germany, and that's already also too far. We can, for the moment, we do malt our barley outside Belgium, but we would like to have a micro maltery installed with one of the farmers. So that's a project that we're working on now. And that's how we actually evolved to what was once the standard. The same with the hops. I told you about the heirloom hops. The Coignot is one example. Other example is the Groene Bel. So there's now one farmer that has different rows of those old varieties of hops. And yeah, this summer will be the 3rd time that we will have a small yield of those hops that we can use.
So
That
cool.
is
So
awesome.
yeah, so cool. That's really, really lovely how you're going back to the land. I love that.
The future is history. That's what I love. Like going back to roots. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. A lot of people tell us you're so progressive, and my answer is always we're just going back to what was once the standard. We have lost a lot of valuable ways of working with suppliers and with local people.
So cool. Yeah. So I have one last question for you, Werner. Do you have a favorite Drie Fonteinen blend that like blew your socks off? That was the best. What's the best beer in your mind, or one of the best years maybe that you guys have produced?
I can, yeah, I really like that question, because for me, and it's the easiest answer, but I will also explain why. The beer I like the most of Drie Fonteinen, it's lambic. But at the same time, there's so a vast variety of lambics, whether it's a young lambic, 1-year-old, 4-year, 5-year-old lambic, they're so different. That and it's also the basis of everything that we do. But sometimes you get like almost pure apple juice. Sometimes you get like more wine-alike notes, and that is so that's for me. That is for me the real magic. And I will give you a little anecdote. The first time one of the first week I was working with Drie Fonteinen, Michaël comes up to me. I was doing some invoicing. He comes up to me with 3 glasses, and he puts those glasses in front of my nose. He says, like, okay, you go and you tell what you taste and what you think of it. And those 3 glasses, in terms of aroma, in terms of taste, were so distinct that I told him, like, look, I think this one is a young one, this one is a 2-year-old lambic, and this one is a 3-year-old lambic. And this is where the magic comes. He says, like, nope, you couldn't be more wrong. It's actually the same lambic, so the same brew, from the same spot, 3 different barrels at the same origins, and they have been lying next to each other. He says, like, this is lambic. You never know what is going to come off. You know what is going to go in, but you never know what is going to come off. And that for me is that's still up to today. I'm sometimes so flabbergasted by what is coming off a barrel, straight lambic, and the difference between different lambics is so big that it's and you cannot put your finger on it, and you cannot tweak it, or you cannot say, what if we do this, would it turn into that? No, you give yourself, or you give your beer to nature, and then you have to do something with it. So it's magic and art together.
That's awesome.
That's beautiful. Like, I'm getting emotional. Well, yeah, go ahead, Dan.
No, I was just going to say this entire recording, I've been smiling. Like me too. I so enjoyed this, Werner. Thank you very much.
For people who want to reach out to either you or the brewery, how do they do so? Social media or a website?
Yes, we have social media. We're very responsive on the website. We also have a contact page, or just email address, which is info at Drie Fonteinen with the letter with the number 3 driefonteinen.be.
Okay.
And I will be answering.
Nice. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for all your time today. We really appreciate this. Has been a really fascinating look inside the brewery, and we really appreciate this. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys for having us.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Estrella Galicia is an independent family-owned brewery in Northwest Spain, founded in 1906. Estrella Galicia Cerveza Especial is a world-class lager brewed using the finest Spanish malts, locally cultivated Galician hops, and the best brewing practices, made out of the state-of-the-art facility in A Coruña. Recognized around the world for quality and exceptional character, Estrella Galicia is a beer like no other. To learn more about Estrella Galicia, follow them at Estrella Galicia USA on Instagram.
All About Beer is back, and we're asking for your support to help provide the independent beer media this rich and colorful industry deserves. Visit our website, allaboutbeer.com, where we're frequently posting new content. And please consider throwing us a few bucks at patreon.com/allaboutbeer. We have low-cost memberships for individuals and small and large companies alike. Every dollar goes to help produce new articles and podcasts.
Looking for an easy hop sourcing experience? Yakima Valley Hops offers the finest quality hops from right here in our valley and premium growing regions around the world. Get the hops you need when you need them with ultra-fast shipping and awesome customer service. With a full line of liquid hop products and all your favorite varieties, no contracts are needed to brew with the best. Shop now at yakimavalleyhops.com. That's YAKIMA valleyhops.com.
Jeffrey Stuffings grew up on the Gulf Coast of Florida. He studied government at Notre Dame and law at Boston College. While in law school, he discovered homebrewing and craft beer. He and his wife Amber moved to Texas in 2007. Shortly thereafter, Jeff began working on starting Jester King with Amber and his brother Michael. Today, Jeffrey focuses on beer making and Jester King's operations. He and Amber live in Dripping Springs, Texas area and have 2 children, Laura and George. Welcome to the show, Jeffrey.
Thanks, Em. Appreciate you having me on.
So, spontaneous beer is incredibly hard to do and unpredictable. So, what made you decide to take this challenge on down in Texas?
Yeah, it's a good question. My first experience, which is fermentation in general, was getting into home brewing. Wort was the first thing I ever attempted to ferment, and just like a lot of folks, home brewers or folks who started there, just learned about monoculture fermentation, and that was the only context that I knew. But then, as my brewing, experience and knowledge progressed, I started to get into the world of mixed culture fermentation, and this is over the course of years. But then, finally started to kind of go down that rabbit hole of spontaneous. Like a lot of U.S. brewers, I was introduced to the spontaneous tradition from the lambic brewers and beers. Of course, there's, as I've continued to learn about spontaneous, there's other cultures and traditions on different continents that have done and continue to do spontaneous. But again, it was the Franco-Belgian lambic tradition that I kind of learned about it. The first beer I ever had, I think like a lot of folks who try lambic, was from Brasserie Cantillon in Brussels, and that beer can be pretty mind-blowing. Rosé de Gambrinus was actually the first spontaneously fermented beer I think I ever tried, and was just kind of floored by it and wanted to learn more. I made a trip to visit Cantillon for the first time in 2012, and got to see the barrels and just kind of breathe in the cobwebs and the mustiness of the room, and just came away highly inspired to see if spontaneous fermentation would be possible in Texas. This time Jester King was about 2 years old, and then I knew it could be done in the United States because Allagash had already, around that time-ish, I believe, had released some of their first spontaneously fermented beers with the coolship Resurgam, their version of a Belgian gueuze. So, obviously there's a pretty different climate from Maine to Texas. So we were skeptical and, really weren't sure if spontaneous would be possible in Texas, but we thought it was worth a try. And so really, number one, to kind of summarize, the love of spontaneous beer that I developed over the last decade or so, and then just a desire to see if it would be possible in a totally different climate like Texas.
Is there anything you do differently because you are so far south, and Maine and Texas are, like you said, completely different climates? Is there anything you have to
Brussels.
do, or Brussels or Maine? Well, I was thinking Allagash in my head.
Yeah.
And now I wanted Allagash for Resurgam because that beer is just top notch. I mean, those are 2 totally different places. Like, I've been to Texas and I've been to Jester King in February, and it was 72 degrees out. It is not 72 degrees in Brussels in February. So is there anything you do to kind of change how you brew, or are you just hoping that it'll be cold one night? Like, what accommodations do you make?
Yeah, a couple things. Number one, our window, our coolship season is pretty small. Typically like December to February. And even like you were saying, we'll have those February days where it's 75 degrees out. So you get these little maybe 4 to 7 day cold snaps, at least, cold snaps for us, where the temperatures get down into the 30s and 40s at night, which in our experience is cool enough to take a 30 barrel batch of worts, that's the size of our brew house, and then chill it in our cool ship overnight from boiling temperature to about 75 Fahrenheit by the next morning. And then by the time we rack to barrels for spontaneous, temperature tends to drop by another 10 degrees or so. So by the time fermentation is starting to kick off, we're at a pretty good range, kind of that cellar temp. So we're able to achieve that, again, for just a small window of time. Speaking of Allagash, I've heard them say that, they actually have kind of the opposite problem, where in the heart of the winter, it's actually so cold, they run the risk of freezing their wort into a block of ice in the cool ship. So I think from what I remember them telling me, is like they're kind of more like fall and spring, where, again, we're just like heart of the winter. And then the other thing we tried, and this is kind of one of those like, necessity is the mother of invention type of things. We had a collaboration planned with Fonteflora Brewing in North Carolina. The collaboration was in Texas. We wanted to do a spontaneous beer, and how it is with people visiting and travel, you can't really plan around the weather. Tickets are bought, trips are planned, and when they came down to do a spontaneous beer with us, it was pretty hot. I think it was like at least 70s, if not even up into the 80s. And we adjusted by actually just kind of pivoting to our old homebrew background, and put wort chillers, just immersion chillers, into the cool ship overnight to kind of aid in the cooling. And that seemed to work pretty well. We were a little nervous that the balance of microbes in the air might be not the right mix just because of the higher temperatures, but it ended up producing a beautiful beer that we called Wander Flora. And so that collaboration with Fonteflora propelled us to actually build a kind of cool ship size immersion chiller that we've used to extend our cool ship season. Not real long. I'm not crazy to really push our luck well past kind of the early spring, but nowadays we will do spontaneous batches all the way into April with the use of an immersion chiller. So I would say those are. And then of course, finally, our barrel room is climate controlled. You go to Brasserie Cantillon, and it's just ambient temperature in their cellar, where we have very thick insulated walls. Solar panels on top of the barrel room to like blunt the heat energy, and then AC cooling to keep it at cellar temp artificially. Without that, I'm thoroughly convinced it would not work.
Based on this latest experiment that you did, experiments is maybe not the right word, because you kind of were doing it on the fly, but is it that there are different microbes in the air at different temperatures, or is it that different microbes survive in the wort at different temperatures?
In my kind of practical, not entirely scientific background and experience, I believe that it's the balance of microbes in the air, primarily. For instance, and this is partially scientific just based on what I've read, is that certain bacteria are kind of more active during hotter temperatures, warmer parts of the year, which kind of throw off the balance of fermentation. And then also, that there is that practical consideration of getting the wort cool, and just if we cranked up the wort chiller as high as we could go, and tried to do spontaneous fermentation in, say, like right now in July. We've never tried it, but my intuition tells me it's just that the fermentation would be pretty nasty in terms of just the flavors that would be produced. Just there's that kind of like cool balance that kind of favors like yeast over bacteria. Even with the benefit of climate control and wort chillers, like Well, I can't be sure because I've never tried it, but
Yeah,
like it just like feels based on all of our fermentation, both mixed culture and spontaneous experience at Jester King, that it would go poorly most of the time.
yeah. It doesn't sound like you want to try it either.
No, no, I mean just like every kind of wild project we've ever tried at higher temperatures just runs such a high risk of just running into fermentation flaws and issues and off flavors.
Sorry, Em, I interrupted there.
No, no,
Oh no,
no.
no,
Don, you're the resident nerd. Like I've
That's
said
right.
before. Don is the nerdy stuff. So, I actually wanted to ask about your barreling since you already talked about fermentation, and where you source your barrels and why is this important? Is it from Texas Hill wineries? Is it from Belgium? Is it from other wineries or breweries? Like where does the oak come from? Or are you not using oak? Are you using something else?
Oh no, great question, Em. We are using oak. So we started off our barrel program with 225 liter, smaller format barrels that we got from local wineries. And they maybe had two, three, four fillings of wine. Nothing real long term. And I would say like for the first at least 2, maybe 3 years of doing wild and spontaneous fermentation, the character was just like dominated by oak. We our very first batches of spontaneous were way too oaky, and it kind of masked the fermentation nuance. Being inspired by lambic, these aren't sure they're wood aged beers, but they're not like real just driven by intense oak character. And really that kind of fermentation and aged hop flavor and aroma I think dominate in a great way. So we like our first ever beer that we did spontaneous, we were confident that it would work because it didn't have any off flavors, and that was definitely like a moment for celebration where I remember giving our head brewer at the time, Garrett Crowell, just a big hug and kind of jumping up and down because we're like, oh my god, this worked here in Texas. But that beer, even though it worked, we knew it was something that wouldn't get released on its own because it was just way too oaky.
Mm.
So we started to acquire, larger barrels, puncheon barrels that are about, 400 to 600 liters. We got those from French wineries. Rocky Mountain Barrel Supply in Colorado helped procure those for us. And even though those were, less, surface area to beer contact, they still were fairly oaky, not as bad. But then after, doing our spontaneous program for, 4, 5, 6 years, we're now up to 13 or whatever. Yeah, this winter was our 13th cool ship season. So about like halfway through the maturity of our program, oak character did start to lessen just after multiple fills over multiple years, but still, like when I do side by sides with our spontaneous beer and Belgian lambic, that is one of the things that jumps out is even to this day, the lambic I think has less oak character given just I mean Cantillon for instance has barrels that I believe go back to the like 70s and 60s, just some really, really old stock. So yeah, we have how we progressed. We've gotten larger barrels and they've gotten more neutral as time has gone on. And for our purposes, just the more neutral, the better. Unless we're like specifically doing like a spirit barrel aged beer, I want just the most like neutral oak I can find because I really want the fermentation to be the star of the show.
Does it matter that they're European oak? Because I thought I read somewhere that American oak is tighter and maybe European oak being less tight has more area for the microbes to take hold in.
Yeah, we do prefer the European oak, although we have worked with American oak barrels and they've been fine. A little bit more oak character, which I don't like and find distracting for this style of beer. But as far as just like microbial adoption in the wood and just fermentation, have not had any issues like getting, maturation with the American oak. But
Okay.
to your point, I do prefer the European.
All right. Em?
Oh gosh, I've got many questions.
Good.
I wanted to ask about terroir. And do you think that your spontaneous beers have a certain Austin terroir? And if so, what does that entail? So if I have your spontaneous beer versus, let's say, Allagash's or another American-made spontaneous beer, what makes Chester King's spawn beers kind of stand out?
Yeah, another good question. For the longest time, I would have said fermentation character, and I still do. But I feel that, being on the outskirts of Austin, Texas, on the doorstep of what's known as the Texas Hill Country, we are on a well. It's called the Trinity Aquifer. It's a big limestone rock formation. Our well is around 800 feet deep, and of course, when it rains, the water has to percolate, through just sheets and sheets of limestone rock. And our water is very hard. It's around 750 million or parts per million, total dissolved solids. And for our farmhouse and spontaneous beers, because we are trying to achieve that terroir, we don't filter or soften our water. It's just the raw well water. And I think when I taste our spontaneous beers, as well as the farmhouse ales we do, the thing after just years and years and years, I finally have settled on the thing that jumps out to me most is the character of the well water. So I would say as far as terroir, I would say that perhaps is number one. Number two would be the fermentation character there. And I'm really happy. This is just for whatever reason, but we get a very nice like stone fruit character in our spontaneous beers. I assign that to fermentation. I don't think it's coming from the malt or the hops or the water. I think it is a fermentation byproduct. I can't tell scientifically why that is. I don't think it's the barrels. Like wood tannins can sometimes present fruity, but we really don't get that with the farmhouse ales that we send to the more or less the same barrels. It's just the spontaneous. So I would say we kind of get this neat kind of fermentation character. I mean, I think microbial terroir is a very real thing. I think the wine industry dominates or demonstrates that all the time with just sure, different soil, different climate, but I think the balance of microbes in the vineyard is very instructive or as well. Where I would say probably less terroir exists is I do have a trouble kind of distinguishing kind of like malt character from spontaneous to spontaneous. Like I can get like different mineralities and certainly different fermentation characteristics, but less so on the grain side. And then I get aged hop character that I have a hard time kind of distinguishing. I mean, I love aged hop character. It's very easy to pick out, generally speaking, but as far as kind of assigning any type of like, well, this is kind of like, aged hop character from, hops that were aged in Texas versus, Europe. I struggle with that as well. So to me, like it's really about kind of the water and fermentation that makes these beers unique to place.
Can I ask, you mentioned the fermentation character being the unique terroir. Have you had any analysis done? Like, are there actually microbes that you can name and identify that are unique to Austin, or is it you just embrace the magic?
Just embrace the magic.
Okay.
We've never had our spontaneous beer analyzed scientifically. We have had some of our mixed culture farmhouse beer analyzed, and UC Davis did like a partial kind of spectrum on it, and it was there's a lot in there. But that was so long ago, I can't even remember all the different microbes. So no, we've never really taken that step to try to understand scientifically what the drivers are.
Okay, good.
What's a
I
typical
accept that.
Yeah. Don's like, I gotta know because he's
I kind of want to know, and then I kind of like
no,
the
embrace the
magic too.
magic.
So yeah.
Yeah. What's a typical spawn day like? Like, are you starting in the afternoon for the evening? What are we talking about when we're talking H hops, the malt profile? Walk us through, boiling, get technical with us for a second, and talk about what's a typical spontaneous day look like over at Jester King.
Yeah, it's a long brew day. We start the night before, just picking out the age hops that we want to use. We started, taking just one, step back. I didn't really appreciate at first just like how both important to kind of the quality and of the fermentation and preservation of the beer that aged hops are, as well as the ultimate flavor profile. I attributed when I first started drinking lambic, I attributed practically everything to the spontaneous fermentation itself. But then, with time, I finally kind of put it together that, a lot of these lambic beers are not dominated, but like heavily, contributed to by aged hop flavor and aroma. So it was almost, we kind of to truly, I think, make good spontaneous beer. Yes, our first batch was fine, but and yes, it worked in Texas, and we knew that. But before it started really becoming good, in my opinion, besides the wood character being tamed, our aged hop program, had to reach maturity, which didn't take too long. It took about 2 years, I would say, and that was involved just taking bales of whole leaf hops. We started with pellets. Like our friends at Live Oak Brewing in Austin gave us some pellets that were like from 2005 or something like that. They were very old. They said they did not keep them refrigerated or frozen. So like room temperature old hop pellets, surprisingly to me, still retained like a lot of bitterness. And a couple of our early batches were just too bitter, because we're using pellet hops. So we switched pretty quickly to using whole leaf hops. So we just get bales in, break them up. We basically just would get hops on the spot market that no one really wanted anymore, because we weren't after them for like nice fresh flavor and aroma. Like, for instance, we'd get like bales of like English, Promise or Challenger with low alpha acids, around like 3 or so. Break them up, put them into burlap bags, and then we put those bags into the attic of an old barn that's next to the brewery that's been around since the 1930s. And we'd let those hops just sit at ambient temperature in the attic of the barn, even through the Texas summer, where it's over 100 degrees in the barn. And after about 2 years of that, the hops really lost all of their bitterness, still retained a nice kind of like, for lack of a better term, kind of like rustic character, and then of course retain their preservative qualities that don't go away with the heat abuse that they go through prior to use. So anyway, sorry for that tangent. We select the hops we want to use, which I'm kind of chuckling to myself because I wouldn't say it's like as critical as like making like an IPA, but but it really is like a science and an art to selecting the right hops for spontaneous, because you can really throw off the balance of the beer if you don't pick hops that are really mature. I kind of point to one general flaw I've had with spontaneous beer that I've from other breweries. A lot of times, like, it's just either the hop character is too fresh or too bitter. And assuming you're trying to go for that kind of like old world lambic, and that's fine, there's nothing wrong with that. But like, you're trying to brew to like that kind of like lambic style, if you will, then properly aged hops is essential. So anyway, we select our hops, pretty high amount of hops as well. It's like a pound per barrel, also kind of not unlike IPAs in that sense. So I think that's a somewhat of something that is a misperception about spontaneous, is that it's not a hoppy beer. Actually, it is. because of the preservative quality. Like, I have not had our own beer analyzed, but I remember looking at, I forget what website it was. Someone had posted an analysis they did of Cantillon gueuze. And I recall the IBUs being around 30, 35. And that's pretty much what we see with our spontaneous too, kind of, that same range. In fact, it was, Jean from Cantillon who recommended we use about, a pound. Of course, it was in metric and we had to convert it, but, he recommended we use about a pound per barrel. So anyway, hop selection is a big part of it. And we come in the next morning. The grist we put together, again, inspired by lambic. We do 60% malted barley. Our malted barley comes from the Texas Panhandle. We work with a maltster called Tex Malt. And then raw wheat, also from Texas, but not malted. And then we do a turbid mash, which basically just, it's not unlike, for instance, doing like a triple decoction or something, just lots of temperatures, lots of rests, lots of transfers. So it's a pretty long mash, 2 to 3 hours of mashing. And then when you do the extended boil, typically about 3 to 4 hours. So at this point, you're about 7, 8 hours into the brew day, and you're, just beginning to knock out. We try to time our knockouts to our coolship about the same time the sun's going down and starting to get pretty chilly. And then, it takes about 45 minutes to fill the coolship. To this day, it's a pretty, well, at least, dramatic, if you will. I mean, it really is kind of, there's lots of like, hisses and pops as the copper, our coolship has a copper skin. It kind of like just gets used to the heat, and it, kind of like shimmies and shakes, and and then there's just something kind of just like meditative about, just watching the wort just flow into the vessel, especially when it's quiet and it just kind of sounds like this little babbling brook going. And then you see these like little cool, like little formations of foam start. They look almost like these little like spiral Milky Way galaxies, just kind of like slowly spinning in the coolship as the wort fills and the foam kind of just spins. And it's one of the things in brewing that just has not gotten old after 15 years. It's just very kind of like, it's kind of like almost like church-like when the coolship's being filled. And then and then we just leave the windows open. We even leave the bay door of our brewery, of our barrel room where the coolship's located, open, just to get as much cold air into the room as possible. And then just go home and come back the next morning.
Very involved.
Yeah. I never would have thought of hop selection as so important. So I think that's amazing. Can hops get too old?
Not in my experience. They go through that kind of like initial kind of like funky, cheesy phase, but then they get, people refer to aged hops all the time as, being like stinky, and I'm not saying they're wrong, but by the time we age them out, they're not all of just kind of any kind of like moisture content is just gone. They're just like brittle, and they can kind of like, if you just like rub them in your hand, you don't get any that, or very little, I should say, of kind of like that, normal like hop kind of oils in your hand. The oils, the moisture, all gone. It's almost just like, really dry, brittle, almost like potpourri. And we've had some bags of hops that I think we've just never used, and they're still in our attic of our barn. And I think they're around a decade old now. And
oh wow.
Yeah, they still seem like they'd be great for spontaneous.
And what is the point of the super long boil? Like, are you just trying to evaporate some of the liquid away, or do you want Maillard reactions, or?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that we just did kind of just out of tradition. And I wish my kind of brewing history was, a little better to kind of truly know like why the Belgians long ago started going for the extended boil. I mean, but on a practical basis, like I like the little bit of like coloration you get and a little bit more of that kind of concentrated wort character. By no means like heavy or cloying. I mean, these beers finish at around 0 Plato and are extremely dry and drinkable. But if you, for instance, do a side by side with just our everyday farmhouse beer, and the spontaneous we do that has the extended boil, you do get kind of that orange character. And then yeah, I mean we brew a fairly low strength words, at least when we're knocking out, because unlike by the time we instead of unlike brewing for an hour, after 4 hours, like we're concentrating it down by about like sorry to jump from like Plato to specific gravity, but like about like 12 specific gravity points.
Okay. A few years ago, you did some experimentation with glass color, and then decided that green glass bottles were the best for your beer. Can you explain a bit about, I guess, why you did that experiment and the outcome and what people should be looking for in your green glass beers?
Yes. So to this day, we fill beer intentionally so in different color bottles. Still, the vast majority of what we're looking for or what we use is brown glass, and that does a pretty great job of not really giving any kind of like light struck character. We've experimented with clear bottles, and while that was fun to play around with, we've pretty much retired clear bottles because I found that like just the light struck kind of like skunky hop, almost like, just take a glass of IPA and intentionally put it in the sun for like just direct, like beaming sunlight, this time of year in the summer for like 5 minutes. And like, you'll get that kind of like skunk top light struck character. And I feel like clear bottles kind of lead to that, which I don't love. But green glass, I think is kind of a happy medium. I forget the specs, but I think green glass is rated to like keep out something like, I think like brown glass. I'm just going off memory here. It's like something like 85% effective, and then like green glass, I think is somewhere lower than that, but still relatively effective at keeping light out. Provided proper carrier beer. I'm not talking like just like leave it
In the sun.
Yeah, but like on a store shelf at least. And so I think that again, one of those necessity things, like when I toured certain, even to this day, toured certain Belgian breweries, they're still using green glass just because that's what's like most available to them or most economical. And so I'm speculating here, but I don't think lambic brewers over the generations were saying, oh well, we need to use this certain type of glass to achieve this certain type of character. I think it was just what the industry at the time essentially gave them to use. But because green glass lets a little bit more light through than brown, you do get a little bit of that kind of like Euro skunk / like light struck character in the beer, which I don't want like to dominate. I think it can be distracting if it's like too intense, but just green glass with like otherwise proper care of the beer adds just a little bit of a layer and a little bit of that like sense memory that kind of brings you back to like drinking beers in Europe, or drinking or having your European beers sent to you. That's kind of fun and kind of I would say really almost kind of part of the style.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
I have one more question for you. In all the years that you've done the Spawn program, was there one year that stood out from the rest as like the best Spawn year?
The short answer is no. Every year we have just and just for context, it's a small program. We do about 15 brews a year. I mean, again, we have a small window of time to work with. So we do 30 barrel batches times 15. So we're only doing about 150 barrels of beer a year. And within those 15 or so batches, there is some, truly awful beer. There's some kind of so-so beer, and then there's some really beautiful beer. Kind of every year has its, shining stars and, batches that just aren't very good. But never have we had kind of a year where it was just like everything was stellar, or thankfully never have we had a year where everything was just really bad. It's been a pretty big mix every year, and I can't tell you why.
Magic.
That's the magic.
Yeah.
Well, this has been a really fascinating discussion. We're very thankful for you to come on and talk about their Spawn program with us. If people want to reach out to you or the brewery, how should they do so? Social media, website? What's the best way for people to contact you and the brewery?
Oh yeah, social media for sure. At Jester King Brewery on Instagram and Jester King Brewery. Yeah, we're on those, and yeah. I mean, if anyone wants to email me directly, I'm always happy to answer, especially technical questions or creative questions about beer. Yeah, my email is jstuffings. That's JSTUFFINGS at jesterkingbrewery.com.
Nice, wonderful.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time. This has been awesome, and yeah, cheers. Thank you so much.
Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you, Em. Thanks, Don.
Don, what'd you think about that? I mean, your mind is racing a mile a minute.
It is. I was so looking forward to this episode because you know how nerdy I am. And I'm going to learn all of these things and I'm going to understand the magic. But such is the nature of spontaneous fermentation that, I mean, there's more questions that came up than got answered. And that's wonderful. Like, I love that.
We'll have to do a part 2.
Yes, anytime. We could do a whole podcast that
just on spontaneous. Exactly. Oh, I bet, because there's so much. I mean, you heard both our guys. I mean, the amount of months and then variation from barrel to barrel, brew to brew, day to day, year to year. I mean, it's so wild to think.
Wild, get it?
That was not intended. That was just me being cool.
Spontaneous, even.
It was what? It's just really great how I love spontaneous beer, and it's delicious. I'm just actually really excited to see how the quality of American spontaneous beer, North American spontaneous beer, has gotten so much better. And how many breweries are doing it and doing it well as well. So that's exciting.
Yeah, and it will only get better because it is such a new, as Jeffrey was kind of saying, they kind of didn't know what they were doing. They kind of had to do some experimentation, and they started with, new, relatively new oak that they needed to work through and all of that. So yeah, it's only going to get better.
Yeah, aged hops, and then figuring out, we're in this climate, let's use a word. Like, it's so cool, like how things keep going. It's awesome. Yeah. So visit the All About Beer podcast. Blah. All right, hold on. Let's try that again. Visit allaboutbeer.com and follow us on social media at allaboutbeer. And if you are feeling generous, and we hope you are, visit our Patreon page, patreon.com/allaboutbeer, to support this show and others. If you have any questions for the experts, email podcast@allaboutbeer.com. That's also the email for feedback, suggestions, or to inquire about supporting the show through advertising. Speaking of advertising, here is a short word from our sponsors.
Looking for an easy hop sourcing experience? Yakima Valley Hops offers the finest quality hops from right here in our valley and premium growing regions around the world. Get the hops you need when you need them with ultra-fast shipping and awesome customer service. With a full line of liquid hop products and all your favorite varieties, no contracts are needed to brew with the best. Shop now at yakimavalleyhops.com. That's YAKIMA valleyhops.com.
All About Beer is back, and we're asking for your support to help provide the independent beer media this rich and colorful industry deserves. Visit our website, allaboutbeer.com, where we're frequently posting new content. And please consider throwing us a few bucks at patreon.com/allaboutbeer. We have low-cost memberships for individuals and small and large companies alike. Every dollar goes to help produce new articles and podcasts.
Estrella Galicia is an independent family-owned brewery in northwest Spain, founded in 1906. Estrella Galicia Cerveza Especial is a world-class lager brewed using the finest Spanish malts, locally cultivated Galician hops, and the best brewing practices made out of the state-of-the-art facility in A Coruña. Recognized around the world for quality and exceptional character, Estrella Galicia is a beer like no other. To learn more about Estrella Galicia, follow them at Estrella Galicia USA on Instagram.
Hey, do you think our listeners are tired of us requesting that they subscribe and give us a 5-star review?
Probably.
But we're still going to ask, aren't we?
Of course.
Please
what,
give us
why
give us a 5-star review. Oh, why?
Yeah,
well,
why?
Because it helps the algorithms, and then other people can find the show, and the more people that we have listening, the more we can spread the gospel of good beer.
Ah, that's good. So please go on wherever your fine podcasts are sold, be it Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. Please give us a 5-star review. It really, really helps. Don,
and it's free.
And it's free. And how
can
people? Yes. And how can people find you on social media, Don?
I am at the Dawn of Beer on Twitter and Instagram and Threads. And people can email me. I am don@thedawnofbeer.com. How about you, Em?
And I am at social media. At social media. That is not my my handle, because that would be everyone's handle. I am at Pints and Panels across all social media, and my website is www.pintsandpanels.com. This show is produced by All About Beer. Visit allaboutbeer.com for articles, notes on this show and others, and to connect via the newsletter and social media. Cheers, everyone.
Cheers. Keep drinking wild.